So today I'm going to be showing you guys how I go about trimming out a door in a traditional fashion. What I mean by that is we're using a casing, a back band, and a plinth block, and we're finally going to trim out the door that we built over a year ago. So let's get right into it. The casing profile that we selected is this one here. It's our Windsor 1 1x4 with the beaded edge. Now it's not complete 1x4, we ripped that down to fit our needs, and I'll get into that. And then our back band is this Windsor 1 wainscot cap. And that is our two-piece casing right there. And the other thing we're gonna need is our plinth block. So I made these plinth blocks a couple videos ago. I'll leave a link in the description to that video where I go through step by step how to make these. But a plinth block is basically a block at the bottom that adds visual support to your casing, makes it a nice transition for your base to die into, and really cleans up the transition at the floor where your casing would otherwise meet the floor. We've got an 1/8 of an inch reveal all the way around the profile of our casing, and you can see it roughly follows the shape of our casing. That's traditionally how plinth blocks would have been done. And like I said, the video will be linked in the description on how to make this. And then since I have an exterior door, one thing I need to do before I start this whole thing is put some foam in the gap there. So I got my foam in there, and one thing I'll mention, since this is a redo, we're retrimming this out. Obviously it used to have another casing here. I have an old line of silicone here. I'm just gonna try to clean that up with a flat bar as best as possible. The casing that we're gonna be using is the exact width of the one that used to be here. Now, if you have the opportunity to make it a little bit bigger, then that's always good because then you can hide that old line, but we are limited by this distance here. So we can't make it bigger on this side because it's just going to be cut off over here on this side. But the beauty of using two-piece casings with a casing as your profile and a back band is you can basically modify this casing piece, make it as big or as small as you want, and you still get the same look throughout the entire house. I could just cut this down to 2 inches if I needed to, and then cap it with the back band, or grow it to 5 inches, which is a little excessive, but you see what I'm saying. But with these parameters set right here for this wall in the corner, we're kind of stuck with this, and this is 3.5 total. So I'm gonna clean this up right here, and then we can start the installation. So starting with our plinth block installation, the first thing you need to do is put it in place and get the reveal set. So what I want here on the jamb is an 1/8 of an inch reveal all the way up the side of my plinth block right there. So that's an 1/8 right there, and I can go ahead and install this. So with that 1/8 of an inch reveal, remember we're gonna have an 1/8 of an inch reveal on our casing too, to our plinth block. So basically right here we've got an 1/8 all the way around this whole transition where the block and the casing meet. So because I have an 1/8 here and I have an 1/8 here, that now adds up to 1/4 up the rest of this distance, and that's what we always want on our door casing reveals. We want a 1/4 inch reveal on the jamb. So I'm going to check that right there, and that's exactly what we want to see. So for the plinth block installation, I shoot 2 nails into the stud here, and then I'll shoot 2 nails into the jamb. And that thing is solid. That's not going anywhere. So now that we have both of our blocks installed, we can go ahead and look at getting our casing going. So first thing we want to do before we even cut our casing is mark off our reveals on our jamb for our casing. And remember, like when I was talking about the block, I said it's a 1/4 inch. So we just need a 1/4 inch reveal marker. You can make something out of wood, something real easy, but I've had this Craig multi-mark for a long time, and this is what I use to mark my reveals. So now with our reveals marked, we can start getting our casing prepped. I have my casing already right here. It's pre-cut a little bit long because we are going to have to send it through the table saw, and it's easier to send the shorter pieces through and keep those going straight than the long 17-footer that these come in. This is 3.5 or 1x4 like I said in the beginning, and our ultimate needs to be 3.5. So that's what we need to do. So we need to cut that much off of this so that when our cap goes on, we're back to the original 3.5 dimension, which is what I was speaking of earlier when I said that's all we've got right here is that 3.5. So we'll go ahead and send these through the table saw at 2.5 inches. So now that we have our casing profiles ripped down to that 2.5 inches, we can simply take our tape measure, stretch it out, set it right on top of our block, right there where it's gonna sit, and then measure up to the reveal pencil line that we marked earlier, that 1/4 inch. Or, since I have these pieces just slightly longer than they really need to be, we can just set them in place, get right on our reveal down there, get on it up here, and then mark it this way. And I'll do the same thing over here. So same thing with the header casing. I can hold it up in place or just stretch my tape out from pencil line to pencil line. But I am just gonna hold it up in place. And to do that, I'm just gonna go ahead and put a 45 on my right side already, get that lined up, and then mark off the left side. And if you're new to cutting casing or trim in general, one technique you can always do is just creep up to your cut line. So cut a little bit long, and then you'll see where the blade's cutting, and you just kind of gradually make it right to your line. That's really how precision is done. If you have a saw like this with one of these shadow lines, it helps a lot because you can see exactly where the blade is going to go. And that looks like it's going to be perfect. And I did not mention, but these of course are 45-degree cuts because we are turning this trim down at 90 degrees. So all the cuts on this whole job are going to be 45 degrees. So this fits. I'll cut my 2 casing legs and then we can look at assembling this. Looks good. That one checks out as well. So now at this point we have our casing ripped down to the correct width and we have all of our pieces cut ready to be assembled. I'm going to pocket screw this joint together. I like to use reinforcement on my miters just because I don't like to see them separating. You could use polyurethane adhesive in the clam clamps. We've done that, works out really well. Or you could use regular wood glue with these clam clamps. You'll just have to wait longer. But because I have the castle right here, it's just so easy. I mean, you just literally, I can have these pocket holes cut in under 10 seconds, get my glue in there, squeeze clamp, screw it together, it's done. So I could make this one piece with my back band on there if I wasn't pre-assembling it. As you can imagine, it would be hard to get that big back band inside my castle machine. Faces are lined up really well. Profile looks good, and I can send those screws. Then we can drop our pre-assembled casing in here and get a look at it. And it looks like everything checks out. We can now trim out this casing pre-assembly with our back band. And one last thing I'll point out about the kind of pre-assembly of the back band with the casing, like I was talking about earlier, is you can't really sand these joints too well if they're already pre-assembled like that. Because you can imagine this piece on here, and you're trying to get your orbital sander in here, and you're scraping up the profile there. So it's just the painter in me. If you guys are new to the channel, we painted our installations for 10 years. We just recently stopped doing it. But the painter in me is always thinking of these things moving forward. Like, hey, I would have liked to have hit that joint with an orbital just for a second. It's a really nice joint, but just flatten it, just make it perfect. But yeah, it's just how I think. So that is another advantage of not doing the pre-assembly. And I am going to hit it with an orbital because I am going to be painting this, so I'm thinking ahead. Fresh 220 on the orbital, low setting. Just gonna feather that joint. So much better, so flush. So with our casing pre-assembly ready to go now, joints are sanded, we can drop this thing in here and go ahead and shoot it, right? No, we can't, because anytime you have a situation like this where you've got a trim piece that's going attached to another trim piece and it's up against the wall like this, obviously you have to attach that trim piece first, which in this case is our back band, because there's no way you're getting the nail gun back there. And we want to attach our back band from the back of it into our casing. We want it to be part of our casing. We don't want to shoot it into a wall. If we had to, then obviously, I can get some super long nails and go through that, but that is a thick piece. I mean, those would have to be, I might even have to get some trim head screws. So first thing we're gonna do before we install our pre-assembly is get this back band piece nailed onto it, and then we can work off that and work our way around. So in similar fashion as to how we case the door, we're gonna do the same thing with our back band. I have my pieces cut a little bit longer than they need to be, and we'll just hold it up in place and mark it off. So to do this, for this side, I am going to have to take down Old Glory temporarily. I have this up here to hide these breaker panels. So then I can drop my casing assembly back in place and then take my back band, set it right in its location. So right there. And now with this in place, to mark this off where I need to cut it, all I'm doing is eyeballing where that miter is on my casing, and then I'm gonna mark that on my back band. So I'm looking right where that miter is, and then bam, making a line right there. When you have two moldings coming together, it is imperative that the miters all line up. If it doesn't, it's gonna be a complete eyesore. And then I can take my back band and line these up and look at my miter, and it looks like I'm probably a 1/16 proud. Let me see, actually. No, actually, I think I'm good. Okay, here's what's going on here. This actually is really good. So what's happening here is because the inside corner of this drywall is like not a 90, it's basically tapering in really hard. In both ways, really. I'm gonna have to trim the back of this back band just a little bit, and it doesn't matter because it's not gonna ever be seen. Perfect world, if this was a true 90 corner, I wouldn't have to do that, but welcome to real life, right? I'm gonna have to shave a blade off this. And that right there is exactly what we wanna see. I've got my miter of my sample piece lined up with the miter of my casing, and everything looks good to go. So I have another piece here already ready to go for my top. I can drop that in. That looks good. When I squeeze clamp this together, I can line that up perfectly. So I'll drop this in here, and then same thing here. I'm going right to my miter line right there, and I'll 45 that. All right, so I'm still good here and over here. I'm happy with that. Looks like we are perfect on our miter. So you can see our miter line here, and then the casing just the back band just lines up right with the casing. So with that, we're gonna go ahead and hold up our last and final piece. Just repeating what we just did. Okay, so now with all three pieces cut, we can do our final dry fit here. That looks good. This will have to be pushed on to the wall more to close up that gap, and that can happen. But what we want to do first, we'll glue our back band together and pre-assemble it onto our casing. That way it's all one. So with this glued together and clamped, I'm going to drive 2 lock nails into it. You can still nail it with the clamps in place. So with those lock nailed in place, I can now take my clamps off. It's much easier to align your glue joint with a clamp than a nail, because once you send the nail, you're kind of stuck with that. Versus the clamps, if you let the clamp go and it's misaligned, well then you can just take it off and reclamp it. Now my back band assembly and casing assembly can get married, and I can show you guys what I got. So this is what we're working with right here, and then I'll spin it around so you can see the back side. This is how that looks. Everything is tight, flush. Our back band trim wraps our casing, and this is exactly what we want to see. At this point, our casing and back band can be assembled together. And to do that, I'm going to be using 16 gauge nails through the back band into the casing. So we have our assembly here. Everything looks amazing, but I do want to prime these corners because I want to see it in all of its glory. Dude, that looks good. That is a beautiful casing right there. So we can drop this sucker in here. That looks stunning. I mean, millwork, guys. If you didn't know millwork makes a house. I mean, this is glory right here. It's outstanding. And it's really nothing that we did. It's the moldings that we're using. Okay, we did make this door, but the two of them together are really doing it for me right now. It's outstanding. Wow. This is the coolest thing we ever done on every video. No, it's just amazing. Hopefully you guys did enjoy this video. I enjoyed making it for you. Let me know if you have any questions down below. Thank you so much for watching these videos. We really do appreciate it. And until the next one, we'll see you then.